When you're running a longer and more involved config like the one we're writing here with VPNs, it's a good idea to stop after each phase, if you will, and just quickly review your config. Just make sure you're not missing anything, because it's easier to spot something you're missing, say from a policy right here, than when our config is 3 to 4 to 5 times as long, because we got to write 2 policies, a crypto ACO, we got to tie that in, we got to write some pre-shared keys, a couple of other things. So it never hurts to review your config before you're actually finished with the entire thing. So taking a look at router 1's there and router 3's here, just that one little difference in the lifetime, which we know theoretically won't make a difference or won't hurt us. And before we get to the transform sets, though, we do need to create those pre-shared keys. That won't take very long. I apologize, we're a little offline there. There we go. And for our pre-shared keys, what we're going to do is start with crypto ISACamp. And we're going to put the key right there in the middle. Set pre-shared key for remote peer. We definitely want an encrypted password. And I'm going to put Ccna for the password here. And we're going to go with the address. And you do actually have to enter the word address, and it's 172.12.123.3. And while we're at it, we're going to go right over to router 3 because I did not pre-config that. Key 6, CCNA address 172.12.123.1. And when you're using pre-shared keys, that's all there is to it. Now let's take a look at these transform sets. First off, talk about what we're transforming here, what we've got, and then we'll configure them. Now, a transform set, it's kind of a merger. What you're doing is defining both encryption and authentication for IKE Phase 2. You're bringing them together because you're defining the encryption and authentication for any IPsec protected traffic using the following: at least one of these 2 security protocols that we talked about earlier, AH or ESP. You can choose to use both. You also have to choose the algorithm to be used by AH and or ESP, depending on the choices you made for the first bullet point. Now on the screen here, in a moment, I'm going to have the choices for the transform set, and the reason I'm showing them to you on the board first is because I want to really point out that some of these are authentication related, some are encryption related, one's compression related. You'll figure that one out, of course, on your own when you see it. But you won't see these comments in paren at the in iOS help. But this is going to be a little smaller font, but here we go. So it's crypto IPsec transform set is the command. Then I'll be asked to name it, and then I used iOS help to see the options. And we see a couple of AH options there. They're both authentication options, one using MD5 and one using SHA. There's our IP compression algorithm option, and quite a few ESPs here, and these are all encryption. You'll see they're using ciphers that we've talked about before with DES, 3DES, and AES. And we've got another authentication here using MD5, and then you have a null encryption option, a seal cipher, and then finally an ESPN, I knew it, ESP transform using HMAC SHA authentication. Now of those, and I know it's an overwhelming list at first, but hang in there. At first, you can only choose one type of each of the following. If you're choosing AH authentication, you can pick one. ESP encryption, one. ESP authentication, one. And then finally, IP compression, the comp LZS option, there's only one there, so that's all you could choose. And let's bring the lab up here. And we've got our keys in. Now we're going to go ahead and start a transform set. And I want to show you some options before I go too far here and show you that the router will actually prevent you from choosing 2 of any of those options that we saw on the board. Let's go with, first off, conft and then crypto IPsec. Now that's the first thing you got to do. Now we're in IPsec land. We're in phase 2, so we need to use the crypto IPsec command, and transform set is what we're going to do. And you're going to give it a name. And there are some of the options, if not all, and of course different routers, different capabilities will have some different choices, but you see the 2 authentication header choices right at the top, MD5 and SHA. And note, let's say that I chose HMD5. Note for the next option that AH SHA option is gone. So again, you can only choose one. I want to go back to the board and show you that list one more time. You can choose one AH authentication type, one ESP encryption type, one ESP authentication type, and of course IP compression. There's only one there to pick. So we're not going to go with AH here though. We're going to go with ESP, and we're going to use 3 DES for our encryption, and then we'll use SHA for our authentication. So right here, I'm going to go ahead with Ccna, ESP, 3 DES. And notice now that the list of options got way shorter because I can't pick, ESP AES any longer or ESP DES because I've chosen 3 DES. That eliminates the other two choices. So now I'm going to pick SHA. Also notice, one more thing I wanted to point out here, notice the CR there. So that means this is a legal command in and of itself. So the authentication options are still there, but they're not required. You can just go with only encryption. But I'm going to go with ESP, SHA, HMAC. And then you'll notice you're down to your AH options and your IP compression options because you've already chosen your 2 ESP options. That's what I'm going with. And we drop down into transform set config mode. Let's take a look at our options here, and not very many. You've got default, exit, and no. We're used to those, and there's only one other one, and that's encapsulation mode. This is where you choose tunnel mode or transport mode, and you actually have to put the word mode first and then transport or tunnel. I'm going to go with transport here, and that is it for our transform set. It's one long line with crypto IPsec transform set, then your tag, whatever name you want to give it, and then your choices, encryption and or authentication. And now we need to talk about the lifetime here a little bit of IKE Phase 2 SA, the actual IPsec SA. We're going to do that right now. We're going to go right into it because it's a global command. It's not in your transform set. So if you look for it there, by golly, you will not see it. It's crypto IPsec, and what we want is security association. I didn't have to type all that out, but it's a good tip when you're first learning a command too, just typing it out all the way instead of shortcutting it a little bit or typing half of it in and let the router take it. I like to type the whole thing out when I'm learning a new command. So we've got show association here. A couple of interesting choices here. We're going to go with lifetime, but I want to discuss that idle time with you because I mentioned in a previous video that you could have this SA deleted after it hasn't been used for a while. And you can do that with idle time. And that should look familiar now, except notice it doesn't tell you how many seconds or what unit of time you're using. So it's a good idea to know that that is seconds. I know you have that down by now, and you certainly even have the range 60 to 86,400 in your head. But if you want to go with idle time, you can do it that way. What we're going to do is take a look at the lifetime options, and notice now that we have the option of seconds, which we would expect by this point, but also kilobytes. So if you want to go by a volume-based key duration and say, okay, the lifetime of the SA is after this many kilobytes goes through, you can do that. And your range gets a little bit larger. So you have to do a little math there to figure out exactly what you want, but that's fine if you want to go with the volume. But if you want to go by time, you'll simply go by lifetime right here. Whoops, I already had that part. Let's try seconds. You actually have to type in the word seconds and then 120 to 86,400. And we'll go ahead and go with 86,400 there. So some extra options there for your Phase 2 SA. But whether you want to use idle time, or you want to tie it down to a certain amount of volume, or you want to tie it down to an overall amount of time, you have all three of those options right there. So I believe, though, we're almost near the end of this config, but we need some kind of traffic to trigger this entire thing. That's our interesting traffic, and we're going to talk about that and define it coming up next.